Welcome to this recording from the Community Research Initiative on the ethical issues in collaborative research. Specifically, the collaborations we are talking about happen through a partnership with an external organisation to UCL, in our case, a voluntary sector or citizen group organisation. Because it's a partnership across different sectors involving different workplace cultures or ways of working, purposes or aims of what's being done, this needs real skill and conversation and dialogue, trust and ideas and story sharing. This will develop the best, most usable, multi-perspective new knowledge. We want any partnership between a master's student, their supervisor and, say, a charity to start as close to the beginning of the research process as possible, including the ideas and development stages. And this means that the external collaborator is involved in the process of designing and actually doing the research. They can influence what happens. Being a research subject is something totally different. Although there's been a move away from using the term research subject, I find it really helpful to make this distinction about influencing, because a research subject is the subject of a study, so they're answering a survey, they're being interviewed, or they're being observed. In terms of influence, they do not have a say on what's being asked or what survey they fill in or what's important. They are being studied themselves. The first point to make is that the ethics that you will have heard about and perhaps worked on in your undergraduate is the formal research ethics committee processes. Broadly speaking, you must have research ethics approval before you can collect any new human data or work with any existing identifiable human data. There's heaps of information of this online if you Google UCL Ethics Committee, for example, and you will receive guidance on this process if it's appropriate or applicable from your course and from your supervisor. Your faculty may even have a specific committee itself, and it's a formal process to encourage and enforce ethical practice in research. This formal process, whilst incredibly important, is not the focus of today's presentation, but it is worth saying that while it's great to be ambitious, a reality check for you should be that it's a huge challenge to start a new research ethics application, gain approval, and complete a research study within a year's master's. It's not impossible, but you should definitely seek advice from your course and check out committee dates, submission deadlines, and required paperwork as soon as you can. People often think that with collaborative research and working with someone from the voluntary sector, you need research ethics. You're speaking with a member of the public, right? And it's about sensitive stuff as well sometimes, right? Well, wrong. Remember, you need research ethics approval for collecting new human information or working with human information that is identifiable. What we're promoting is working with and talking with, collaborating with people who represent or may have experienced what it is you're interested in. Think of them a little like a potential co-worker. So this formal research ethics is not needed to collaborate. However, there are broader ethical questions about what we do on the Community Research Initiative. What is right or just to do for research? Who does it benefit, for example? It's so easy to think that it's obvious how your proposed question is important. It's an important question, but who is it important to? And on what timescale is it important? Exactly how the research you're proposing is useful, or might it be used? We use the word implementation or implementable, and all too often research stops short of looking into the sustainability or implementation of the new knowledge. Of course, this will differ from discipline to discipline, but it's very difficult to expect master's research to be usable or implementable given the timescales involved. And if human subjects are required, it is worth thinking about alternatives like open data sources like Mendeley. This is a research data repository. It is an ethical question in terms of, say, public investment, although that's not necessarily applicable at master's level, but it's an important question as to whether or not a new data set is needed for every new research question studied. Think seriously about secondary data analysis. These skills are very sought after, and it's not all about proving that you can interview someone. So thinking deeper about the ethical issues, let's consider the different roles on a research project. In a study where the subjects are human, they might be the subject of the research itself. You will recognise the role of researcher, you and the supervisor, maybe the person or people running a research project. It's often those who have proposed the project idea or question in the first place, And note that I'm not saying trained in research or a professor or holding a PhD or a research student. There's the role of collaborator, generally someone new, bringing something new or a different part of the jigsaw puzzle in a very an interaction style that's very about enhanced problem solving and planning between multiple people. And there's also the role of stakeholders, so anyone who could be impacted or involved in the research. So in dementia research, for example, stakeholders can include the relatives of people living with dementia, or the formal carers, possibly care homes or community centres or psychiatrists. The key point here is that these roles may blur. So even in non-collaborative research, and by that I mean not collaborating with an external organisation like we're suggesting, you can find the role of the researcher can blur with stakeholder, especially when lived experience is central to the work. And this is really common in health services research, for example. Personal experiences driving research is common and a really good thing. In a community research situation, collaborating with a voluntary sector organisation, a collaborator could become a subject as well as potentially being a stakeholder too. So these blurred roles can really throw up ethical or moral challenges, perhaps around anonymity or confidentiality. In addition, your collaborator may have lived experience or trauma to be sensitive and respectful of. The academic or student pursuit, so your dissertation, must not be given priority over the interest of the community or individuals involved. And questions like what happens when something sensitive is shared when someone is in the role of collaborator, but they don't want this included from a research subject perspective, so not to be used as part of the data in the study. So what's wonderful and exciting about participatory research, that is allowing other people from outside academia to participate in developing research, these exciting and wonderful things can also present challenges. Some are the same as traditional research, but some are unique to the fact that you are working with citizens or representatives. There's a power imbalance to be aware of. Our position as researchers are students from a privileged university, plus the fact that with your collaborators there's often lived experience, or they're representing people or a personal view. Sensitive, personal, unique and emotional input. And the challenge is that everyone has to be valued the same and feels they are heard and have some power. There's shared decision making that needs considered, a process of co-creation that requires more conversation and dialogue than if you were speaking to someone within academia who understands the same ways of working that you do. So you must make sure that assumptions are considered head on and cleared up, and everyone should understand what's going on, whatever their background. So it's kind of like a pendulum swinging from one extreme to the next, from community to academia, from community to academia, closer and closer to the middle until it settles. A mutual place of agreement must be found. A further consideration is the ownership of data, or something called intellectual property. As a student, any research done by you remains your intellectual property, but it is worth reflecting on the background intellectual property or existing knowledge that your collaborator may have contributed and brought to the table. So conversations around use of data, use of findings and the ownership of data, these conversations have to be done early, upfront, and be honest and transparent and involve your supervisor. There is openness to do with this research, and it's not a case of collaborating with a partner at certain stages of the project and then retreating back into the university buildings to carry out the research. You must keep all partners, including your community collaborator, informed about progress and asking what they think and inputting to it and listening to them. It's worth having early conversations about how best to do this and the frequency that you should check in. It's about managing expectations and being open and honest about your abilities as a student and what can be delivered within the confines of a master's project. And there's benefit. Your work must not harm a community, and this includes perpetuating or deepening prejudices or harmful stereotypes. The benefits of research must be in line with the expected input from a collaborator. And finally, accountability. If you think of yourself and your supervisor as professional stakeholders for research, we're accountable for our actions towards other stakeholders that have excellent different knowledge, but we're inviting them into our world and we must protect them because we're asking them to participate with us. And in a similar vein, we would encourage organisations to support you and your supervisor when topics are sensitive or triggering, as they would for their own staff. So how do we make sure that we are practicing ethically during our collaborative conversations and potential research projects? Well, we should try to live by these principles. Developing research relationships based on mutual respect. The principle of democratic participation, so we encourage people to contribute meaningfully to the decision making. We live by the principles of active learning, viewing research collaboration and the process of research as an opportunity to learn from each other. We keep ourselves focused on making a difference so that we promote research that creates positive change for communities of place, interest or identity. We take collective action where individuals and groups work together to achieve that change. And we put the principle of equality and inclusion at the centre of things, encouraging and enabling a diverse range of people to lead, design and take part in research. And finally, maintaining a high level of personal integrity, where those involved behave reliably, honestly and in a trustworthy way. We don't overpromise and we don't disappear at the end. So thank you for listening to this short overview of some of the ethical issues surrounding collaborative research with an external partner, such as a voluntary sector organisation. I hope you found it helpful to start thinking about your dissertation research. And our main point is that great research questions can emerge from conversations with people outside of the university, and that this can be done sensitively and respectfully. Have a great rest of your day.